Good day, good afternoon, good evening, and a very warm welcome to today's webinar, COVID-19 and International Education, Impact, Challenges, and Future Outlook. COVID-19 and International Outlook, a truly timely subject close to everyone's heart and a topic which is really important to both not only nations, but each one of us in our own day-to-day lives. The interest is certainly seen through our guests who are participating with us today, who are almost 400 across Australia, India, and the globe. My name is Vinod Mirchandani, Director India for the Australia-India Business Council, and speaking with you this afternoon from Mumbai in India. In case you are not already familiar with the Australia-India Business Council, it was established in 1986 and has been fostering bilateral trade between the two countries for over 30 years. We encourage you to follow us and join us in further strengthening the many and very important ties between our two countries. The Australia-India Business Council has recently formed chapter chairs, which highlight the importance of the sectors between the two nations and are led by capable people from the Australia-India Business Council in both countries. And the Education and Skills chapter is presenting today's seminar along with the Victorian chapter of the Australia-India Business Council. Over the past months, the onset of COVID-19 and its unprecedented effect on our lives and plans has drawn and faced upon the education sector with challenges more than one, some of which are going to be unveiled and discussed in today's panel discussion. The international education is a flagship sector in the Australia-India relationship and one of particular significance to the state of Victoria. I would like to commence by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land we have gathered today on in every part of our nations, both here in India and Australia. On behalf of the Australia-India Business Council, a very warm welcome to each one of you. I would like to particularly welcome the Indian High Commissioner to Australia, the Australian High Commissioner to India, our keynote speaker, the Honorable Dan Tehan, Australia's Minister for Education, Dr. Partha Mukherjee, Australia-India Business Council's Chapter Chair for Education and Skill Development, and who will play the role of moderator for this evening. Ms. Ravneet Pa, a name that needs no introduction in the education world, the newly elected president for the Australia-India Business Council Victoria chapter, and of course our illustrious panel, who each of them will be introduced before they make their comments. And thank you very much to all our audience from joining in from the comforts of your home or offices, and trust this finds you well and safe. I would like to share the format for this evening. We will commence by the opening remarks by our High Commissioners, followed by a keynote address by the Minister, and thereafter the panel discussion, which we are all anxiously awaiting to hear, followed by a question and answer session. I urge you to prompt the question through the questions box at the bottom of the Zoom webinar format. May I also alert you that this webinar is being live on Facebook and other social media platforms. At this point, I would like to thank our sponsor, Study Path International, for supporting this webinar, who are international student consultants that thrive in helping students achieve their international goals. Thank you. It is now indeed a privilege and a pleasure to have the opportunity to introduce the Honorable Anumala Jitesh Sharma, High Commissioner from India to Australia, who is currently based in Canberra. High Commissioner joined the Indian Foreign Service in 1986, has worked in the Ministry of External Affairs as Under Secretary Europe East and Director Central Asia. Mr. Sharma's assignments have been far many, and particularly has been Ambassador of India to Uzbekistan and High Commissioner of India to Fiji. With those opening introduction, High Commissioner, may I request you to kindly address this webinar and kindly unmute yourself and make your opening remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good evening to each one of you, or good afternoon, as the case may be. I'm indeed delighted to participate in this webinar on COVID-19 and international education, impact, challenges, and future outlook. It is great that AIBC has set up this discussion. Indeed, it is a timely initiative. It is a great honor to have His Excellency Dan Tehan, Minister, participating in this event. This shows the importance that is being given by the Government of Australia to this relationship or this aspect of our relationship. It is also a pleasure to have my counterpart, Barry O'Farrell, a great friend of India. Uh, Friends, the pandemic has greatly changed the way we engage with each other and the way we do business. But the fact is that the pandemic is temporary, but the partnership between India and Australia is here to stay. Let me recall the virtual summit between our two PMs on 4th June this year, when our ties were elevated to that of comprehensive strategic partnership. The document recognizes, among other things, that education, research, and skills are a central component of the relationship. It would be of interest, I think, in the context of this discussion, that this document also recognizes that we will work together to support the development of education campuses in each other's countries. I may add that an MOU on vocational education and training was also concluded within the framework of this summit. We do recognize, we are realistic, and that the pandemic has the potential to interfere with our plans. And I am really happy, delighted to be in a position to thank the Government of Australia and Minister Dan Tehan, especially for providing such a caring environment for our students, notwithstanding the domestic challenges. There have been serious situations in the past involving the safety of Indian students. In the recent period also, it is a very, very unusual situation. But each time we find that the Australian government has engaged with us and worked with us to provide the confidence and the best kind of solutions that are possible, which will inspire confidence. So once again, I would like to thank Minister Dan Tehan and through him the entire Australian governments and relevant authorities. As we went into the pandemic situation, Indian students were already discovering Australia. I understand there were almost 100,000 Indian students benefiting from world-class education in Australia. In India, also, there have been some changes which are relevant when Australia looks to engage with India and when India looks to engage with Australia. The National Education Policy 2020, much awaited document, provides the basis for taking India to the next level in terms of development. Providing universal education, to quality education, is the key to India's continued ascent and leadership on the global stage in terms of economic growth, social justice, and equality, scientific advancement, national integration, and cultural preservation. There is the expectation that selected and top-class universities will be facilitated to set up campuses in India. And knowing the strength of Australia, we will certainly look forward to some of these world-class institutions here with long traditions of excellent teaching, setting up campuses in India. The process for enacting enabling legislation is underway. Very recently, on 22nd September, Prime Minister Modi spoke at Guwahati and said the objective of NEP includes foreign universities setting up campuses for local students to get global exposure here. I don't want to take much time, but to start this discussion, I will highlight a few points which seem to me as relevant and important. India has always been an open country, and students have always been free to travel outside to join universities outside as they feel that suits them. As they discover Australia, more can be expected to join universities here. India also has some world-class educational institutions. For instance, the IITs, IIMs. There are several institutions which really enjoy global standing, and the products from these institutions, they enjoy wide respect all over the world, and some of the top CEOs of the world. In India, the issue has largely been one of upscaling. Higher education is often conducted in English medium, which would be relevant for Australia. But we would also like to encourage other Indian languages also, that is from the Indian point of view. But of course, it's The point is that it is relatively simple for Australians to engage with India. Many Indians speak at mother tongue level English, and if I'm not mistaken, India is the second largest English speaking country in the world. COVID-19 may have given us an opportunity to push the use of technologies and use distant learning and online methods of teaching. But my sense is, for now, students will tend to prefer campus-based studies. So we look forward to the best solutions which use technology, online education, campus education, and provide those right kind of opportunities where Indian students can benefit from Australia's strengths and advantages. So with that, let me wish each one of you fruitful deliberations, and I thank AIBC once again.
Thank you very much, High Commissioner, for those inspiring remarks and really reminding us of the broad framework that was set between our two prime ministers. Your opening comments has certainly laid the context of this panel discussion. And thank you very much once again for not only your time, but sharing your forward-looking, inspiring thoughts with us from the new education policy to opportunities that exist between our two nations. Thank you very much once again. It is now indeed a privilege and a pleasure to introduce the Australia's High Commissioner to India, His Excellency, the Honorable Barry O'Farrell, AO, who is currently based in New Delhi. Mr. Farrell served in the Parliament of New South Wales from 1995 to 2015, including as the state's 43rd Premier between 2011 and 14. As the Premier, Mr. Farrell initiated and led several trade delegations and missions to India to promote economic, cultural and social links between New South Wales and the states of India. He has also served as the Special Envoy to India for New South Wales, and it certainly has already made a significant contribution to the Australia-India relationship and continues to do so in his position as High Commissioner of Australia to India. His Excellency, may I kindly request you to make your opening remarks and kindly unmute yourself. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. And can I say at the outset, if you see my camera go off, it's not because I lack interest, it's just we have some bandwidth issues here at the High Commission, and it helps me to hear, if not see, by turning the camera off occasionally. So good day, and thanks for this opportunity to speak about what I'm seeing here in India, what I'm hearing from the Indian government education, and to highlight some of the challenges and consequences that COVID has brought to the international education industry. Can I acknowledge my esteemed and senior colleague in terms of importance, not age, Gitesh Sarma, and also acknowledge Minister Tian, who, when I interact with the Minister for Education here or the Secretary of Education, continue to comment about the enthusiasm that he brought to his visit to India last year, an enthusiasm that I saw when I heard him speak following that visit. As the High Commissioner in Australia has said, the elevation of the bilateral relationship between India and Australia to a comprehensive strategic partnership really is testament to the strength of the bond between our two countries. We know that education is central to this relationship. Peter Varghese reminded us of that in his Indian economic strategy. And the power of education to build people-to-people links and soft diplomacy will bring our countries even closer together, not just during these times, but in that post-COVID world we're all looking forward to. Prime Minister Modi has publicly bestowed his trust in the Australian government and the efforts being made by all sections of society in support of the vibrant Indian community, including students in Australia during this time. Can I echo Gitesh's comments in placing on record my appreciation for the support of the Australian government? In particular, can I say, having spoken to most of the Vice-Chancellors, the extraordinary efforts that the universities in Australia have gone to in ensuring that Indian students, as well as other foreign students, have been looked after as this pandemic has had an impact. But again, to commend the Indian diaspora in Australia for coming forward during this pandemic, as they did during the bushfires and in other crises, to assist with this effort as well. I know that Minister Tian's always looking for metrics around the Australia-India relationship. One of the metrics I use is that 1 in 35 Australians are of Indian origin. In other words, either born in India or had one parent born in India. And that diaspora is helping to grow the relationship and certainly is growing the friendship or the doorstep between our two countries. COVID has obviously created a shift in India's education system, both domestically and internationally. I have to say I'm incredibly impressed with how the Indian government is seeking to progress the implementation of its national education policy that Catriona has referred to. At a time when the pandemic threatens the economies of all nations, the Modi government seems determined to maintain focus on India's demographic dividend, its massive working age population, which requires education and skills to help build India's road to economic recovery and secure its ongoing future prosperity. Over the past 7 months, I've witnessed India implementing digitalisation at great speeds in response to COVID's challenges. The pandemic has popularised the use of many long neglected online technologies, such as the one we're using, and has begun to strip away some of the old perceptions about the quality of online learning that is available. But the Digital India policy has broader goals. It's designed to drive productivity, market penetration, and better service delivery to citizens of this country. And the latter, I know, has been a long-term Modi priority since his days from leading vibrant Gujarat. And for those of you who may be viewing this in New South Wales, when you look at those Service New South Wales centres, can I tell you that was a direct steal of what Chief Minister Modi was doing in Gujarat back in 2012. And I know that for a fact because I'm the person that took the idea back to Australia. I don't think that makes me a criminal. I think it makes me someone who delivered better services to the people of New South Wales. Large-scale structural reform is being implemented across the Indian economy, and India's national education policy is an example of the type of long-term transformational policy being undertaken. India is not wasting this crisis. It's pursuing the opportunities that it presents to position itself better for the future. When I speak about the economic benefits to our international education sector through Australia's engagement with India, I speak with conviction dating back to my first trade mission as Premier of New South Wales in 2011. In recent months, my engagement here with government agencies, think tanks, other stakeholders has done little to dampen my enthusiasm for the future of the India-Australia education ties and the trajectory of that relationship in the medium to long term. Obviously, COVID has created some practical, short-term issues to be dealt with, but as I think you'll hear today, efforts are being made to overcome these and to look towards that resumption of the traditional relationship between us on education. Now, Prime Minister Morrison recently commented that the post-COVID world will see us emerge into a poorer, more disorderly and more dangerous world. All countries are obviously focused on repairing economies and restoring economic growth, that economic growth required to fuel the future progress of their nations and of their citizens. And India is no different. The Indian government is getting on with the job of ensuring a return to a strong, sustainable, long-term growth. It does so from a position of advantage. Its large, tech-savvy, youthful, and increasingly urbanised population, an almost unquenchable appetite for education and skills, and as a home to support the reliable supply and manufacturing chains that COVID has reminded us are critical for the future. Now, when Minister Tian came home from India last year, he impressed me and others with one of his metrics, and that was that 1 million people turn 18 in this country every year. As I try to explain to Australian audiences the size of India, we all know it's 1.34 billion people, but to try and get it into perspective, my latest metric, Minister, is that there are more 9-year-olds in India than the total population of Australia. And as Catriona and I both know, there are many more people aged below 9 and above 9 in this country. Australia and India will continue to share a commitment to excellence. We'll continue to share collaboration in research, building community capacity, and a knowledge economy. And I remain strongly optimistic about the relationship, particularly in the education sector. The strength of our relationship has been revealed by this pandemic. It has real momentum to assist us to capitalise on that brighter, more optimistic and opportunity-laden post-COVID world we're both destined to live in. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, High Commissioner Barry O'Farrell. That was indeed a very heartwarming opening remarks, and really highlight some of the natural competencies and common aspects between the two countries. Thank you once again for sharing your thoughts. And I think what has been heard commonly between both our opening remarks is, while there are complementarities and the challenges are also in common. So with that, I'd like to once again thank both the High Commissioners for sharing their opening remarks. And I think there's a lot of complementarity in the remarks that we heard today, which sets us in tone for what look forward to a compelling panel discussion ahead. I would now like to take the opportunity to invite Ms. Ravneet Pawar, President Victoria Chapter, Australia India Business Council, to introduce our keynote speaker, the Honourable Dan Tehan, Minister for Education, Australia. Thank you. Ravneet.
Thank you very much, Vinod. It is an absolute pleasure for me to be here this afternoon or this evening. On behalf of the Australia India Business Council, Victoria, it is my pleasure to welcome you all today. It is a pleasure to acknowledge the presence of both the High Commissioners, and thank you to them for their support to the Australia India Business Council. Australia India Business Council Victoria Chapter delivers an energetic business cooperation aiming to enhance the Victoria India Economic Strategy and the India Economic Strategy as well. Friends, in the shadow of COVID-19 pandemic that has impacted our world far and beyond, it is imperative we develop a stronger and a deeper framework for integrated higher education. This needs a strong commitment, a deep understanding to help drive the social, cultural, and educational developmental goals. Today, we are all here to talk about international education, its impact, challenges, and the future outlook in this pandemic world. It is my pleasure, absolutely my pleasure, to welcome our Honourable Minister, and it's a privilege to introduce him as a distinguished guest for today, the Honourable Dan Tehan, MP, Minister of Education, Government of Australia. Thank you, Minister, for your kind presence, and I recollect our interactions during your last visit to India. The Honourable Minister Dan Tehan, MP, is a member for One and All in Victoria. He was sworn in as the Minister for Education on 28th August 2018. Mr. Tehan served as Minister for Social Services from 20th December 2017. Prior to that, he was the Minister for Veterans Affairs, Minister for Defence Personnel, Minister assisting the Prime Minister for Cyber Security, and Minister assisting the Prime Minister for the Cemetery of Anzac. Mr. Tehan was elected to the Federal Parliament in 2010 and has held positions as the Chair of the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Intelligence and Security, Chair of the Victorian Consultative Panel for the Black Spot Programme, Chair of the Coalition Policy Committee on Economics and Finance, and also the co-chair of the Parliamentarians Supporting Cancer Causes. He's also the co-chair of the Parliamentary Friends of Youth Mental Health and chair of the Coalition Friends of Tourism. Mr. Tehan has master's degree in International Relations and Foreign Trade and Affairs and Trade. May I request the Minister to share his thoughts?
Thank you, Ranveet, for that very kind introduction, and can I acknowledge both High Commissioners and thank you both for your very kind words, and in particular, High Commissioner, can I just acknowledge your recognition of the role that the Australian Government, Australian universities, state and territory governments have played in ensuring that the Indian students who are here are safe and well, and to the best of our ability have been able to continue their education. Can I also thank you for the contribution that they've made to our nation as we've worked through this pandemic. One of the things that we did when the pandemic hit was allow our Indian students to work longer hours, and they were able to work in our aged care facilities, in our supermarkets and in other areas to really help us as we went through the challenge of dealing with the pandemic. And to me, their contribution to helping us has been a significant one. And I really appreciate the kind words that you've said about how we looked after our Indian students. Can I also acknowledge our universities and also our state and territory governments working collaboratively with the federal government in being able to do that. And my hope is that what we've been able to do to help and support our Indian students and all our international students through this pandemic will stand us in very good stead next year and the years beyond, as we seek to rebuild what to Australia is an incredibly important market, an incredibly important activity. Can I say to High Commissioner Barry O'Farrell, Barry, it's wonderful to hear and see you, and to hear that you've settled in so wonderfully well. And that metric around the 9-year-olds, I think, is quite extraordinary and will really hit home when you're talking, especially to audiences back here in Australia. And thank you for the wonderful contribution that you've made to Australia-India relations. And I know that the relationship is in very, very capable hands when we have you as High Commissioner in India at the moment. And good luck for your tenure. And my hope is that at some stage I'll be able to get back over and meet with you in person and visit again, because I must say, although it was less than a year ago, it was a remarkable visit. It was a visit that I enjoyed immensely, and one which I was really wanting to build on in hosting the Indian Education Minister this year, and hopefully then being able to get a return council set up the following year. But COVID-19 has unfortunately got in the way, but I think all that it has done and all that it has achieved is really stall what is a wonderful, wonderful relationship, a relationship that I think is going to continue to go from strength to strength. And I think if COVID has done anything, it has re-emphasised the importance of the Australia-India relationship and the need for us to continue to grow and develop and strengthen it over the many years to come. And when I was thinking about what I would say this afternoon about the relationship and where we wanted to go and what we needed to do, I was reminded of a wonderful opportunity that I had when I was in India last November to meet with 3 Indian students who were about to come to Warrnambool in my electorate to study at Deakin University. And if you'll excuse me, I'm just going to show the photo, and I hope if I get it near enough, I don't know whether I'm going to be able to for everyone to be able to see it. But these 3 young students from rural and regional India were about to embark to Australia to study at a regional university in the southwest of Victoria. And I just thought it was such an exciting development to be able, not only to be able to meet these students, but to see and understand what were the next stage that we're about to embark on our education relationship. And I know from the Australian government point of view that we want to see that program continue, where we're encouraging international students to diversify in terms of where they went to study in Australia, not just to our capital cities, but also into our regions. And we want to make sure that we can see that continue. Can I say that we also want to build on the discussions that we had during my visit? And I was incredibly interested when I was in India to learn and hear about the new education policy and the opportunities that it would present to Australian higher education providers in India. But also, I wanted to send a very clear message that there are opportunities here, also in Australia, for the higher education providers of India. And one of the things that I'm very, very keen to see is to make sure that this is a proper two-way relationship. So not only do we want to be given the opportunity for our providers to invest in India, but we want to also provide the opportunities for higher education providers in India to look at the Australian market as a place where they could come and invest and seek to grow the international education market here. Also, what we want to see through programs like the New Colombo plan is to make sure that we're seeing Australian students travelling and studying in India, as well as welcoming the more than 100,000 Indian students who are coming to Australia to study. We want this to be a truly two-way partnership, and that's something I think we all should commit to going forward, is that we grow the strength of the relationship, not only in India, but also here in Australia and vice versa, because that is a real partnership, a partnership where both countries can invest, where students can embark on study in both directions. And one of the things that we discussed widely was in particular how we could get more PhD students from both countries going and studying, whether it be in India or coming here in Australia. And that's something else that I think we should look to, that we should seek to build on, because especially at that level, that research level, when researchers are just starting off as part of their careers, if we can build relationships at that time, that will cement the ongoing research relationship between our two countries. So, because I think that's going to become equally as important as making sure that we've got mobility when it comes to international students either being going to Australia to study at our excellent universities, high-class universities, or whether it's Australian students seeking to go to India and do the very same thing. That's a key part of the relationship in the education area, but another part is continuing to build on our research partnership. And if we can begin by ensuring that PhDs are travelling between our countries to study, that would be an excellent start. But I would love then to build on that and make sure that research partnership and research investment continues to grow. One of the real challenges we've seen here in Australia as a result of what's happened to the international education market this year is that it's really created difficulties in terms of ongoing investment into our research capability and into our research jobs. And one of the things from a government point of view is that we're looking at, and we're hopefully be able to make some announcements in the budget on how we can support our research effort here in Australia. But we also want to make sure that we continue to build on the collaboration through our research. And I think this is an area of great opportunity with India. If we can particularly look at areas of mutual complementarity, whether it be in the agricultural area, whether it be in the energy area, Barry mentioned the digital area, all these areas are areas of high complementarity where we could really build on our research strengths. And my hope is that once we get international travel up and running again, my warm invitation to the Indian Minister, Education Minister, to visit Australia is still there. And I would love to be able to host here in Australia an Australia-India Education Council meeting, where not only are we talking about international students, but we're also placing research at the forefront of our relationship, because I think there are incredible opportunities for both countries in that regard. And I know Prime Minister Morrison shares that willingness and that desire that we build the collaboration between our nations when it comes to research. So in conclusion, can I just say it's wonderful to be with you all this afternoon. I think that the future is incredibly bright for our two nations. I think that COVID-19, if nothing else, will actually enhance and strengthen our relationship going forward. I think more and more there is a realisation that the Indo-Pacific is going to be the place where global politics is going to occur. where strategic developments are going to be extraordinarily important, where global growth is going to come from as we grow ourselves out of this pandemic. And Australia and India are at the heart of the Indo-Pacific. And the closer we can build and strengthen our relationship, the greater those economic bonds, the greater those people-to-people bonds will occur. But also, I think, the greater the bonds that can occur in the education sectors, of both countries. So I think the opportunities are there for all of us to explore. We've just got to make sure that we put the energy into it, we put the desire there, the willingness to work together. And I think the opportunities that will come our way will be absolutely enormous. So it's been wonderful to join you all this afternoon. I look forward to the discussion that's going to continue.
Honourable Dantihan, Minister of Education, a very big thank you to you. We appreciate your time and your keynote address. You have shared your vision around the relationship between the two countries, your commitment to the relationship, and your vision on the opportunities in and around the education sector in a two-way relationship. You spoke about leveraging the new Colombo Plan, which ensures or provides support to the Australian students to visit overseas country with the grant from the Australian government. You talked about the PhD students' contribution and they coming to Australia and collaborating with the research and the new technology areas, if I may add that. All these are very, very reassuring and of immense interest to the stakeholders of the education ecosystem. And I'm sure these are also very interesting to the listeners today. I, as a National Chair of Education Chapter of Australia-India Business Council, and on behalf of the entire education team of AIBC, we look forward to more interactive sessions with you and soon. So thank you very much. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Now we go to the next segment, which is the panel discussion. Today we have an eminent group of professionals and education leaders in here who will share the thoughts and ideas. Post-COVID, the world is not going to be the same. The education design, the education delivery, the education administration, and the role of the partners, stakeholders, and the ecosystem will progress to the most suitable next level of innovation and contextualization. The leaders are already thinking, innovating, and implementing the new plans. It will be a privilege today to hear from the pioneers some of the game-changing ideas in the next 30 minutes. We have a panel of 6 eminent speakers today who take approximately their power-packed 5 minutes each to share their invaluable ideas and experience. I'm sure the listeners will be very keen to hear them out. I shall invite them one by one and we'll take all the questions at the end of the 30 minutes. With this, I invite our first speaker, Ms. Catriona Jackson. Catriona is the Chief Executive, Universities Australia, the voice of Australia's universities. We could get an overview of the current thinking of the Australian universities post-COVID from Catriona. Her topic today is supporting student resilience in these challenging times. Over to you, Catriona.
Thank you very much. Look, my only regret today is that we can't physically be together. I will not ever forget the extraordinary warmth of our welcome when we were all in Delhi last November. It's lovely to see so many familiar faces. I hope and trust that your families are well. It is a very difficult time for everyone, but particularly for those of you who are in India today. My respects and salutations to two excellencies, Sharma and O'Farrell, and of course to the Australian Education Minister, Dan Tehan, who was such a vigorous participant in that November visit to India last year. Gee, it's not 12 months, but it seems like 10 years ago. I'm going to talk about students today, but also a little bit about the Australia-India relationship without taking up too much that might be addressed by genuine experts in the field. And it is slightly intimidating to be amongst this group of people who have spent a lot of time studying India, in fact, in some cases, whole careers. Australia and India share a deep bond of common humanity and common interests, and that is so clearly on display as times are more difficult than they were when we last all met. India is, of course, the largest democracy in the world, a major power and a very good friend in an increasingly complex and uncertain world. People-to-people connections tell you that. 1 in 50 Australians was born in India. Around 700 citizens and residents can claim Indian ancestry. My mother reminded me yesterday that when she was a 21-year-old student, quite naive and young at Melbourne University, she was sent to India, and it has marked her life. She'll never forget the things she learnt and the extraordinary connections she made from that point on that she retained for the rest of her life. India is the largest source of skilled migrants and the second largest source of international students to us here in Australia. As I speak, there are more than 90,000 Indian citizens enrolled at institutions, educational institutions, more than 65,000 at Australian universities. Almost all of those students, I think over 95%, are actually present here in Australia undertaking their studies. As the hard reality of COVID-19 settles in, everyone is doing it tough, but I want especially to acknowledge the resilience of Indian students here and at home. I cannot imagine how difficult it must be to be so far from home, to be studying online, to be far from family, from your mum, your dad, your brothers, your sisters, and worrying about them at the same time as you work terribly hard to complete your studies in a very different learning environment to the one you expected. I've never seen anything quite like what happened in Australian universities, and I'm sure it was the same in India, as we transferred whole curriculums into online format overnight. We won't pretend there weren't hitches, there weren't things that needed to be sorted out, but both students and staff were incredible. They were innovative, they were responsive, they worked unbelievably hard to help everyone learn how to learn in quite a different way. I do want to reassure people that Australian universities are doing absolutely everything they can to support Indian students during this pandemic, absolutely acknowledging the extra level of stress and pressure there is being so far from your home country in circumstances like this. Australian universities have constructed a large hardship funds and distributed them right across the sector. $112 million in support payments have been distributed to around 77,000 students. The scale of the need is very extensive. We know many Indian students, just like their Australian friends, have lost part-time work through absolutely no fault of their own. In addition to direct financial assistance for students in need, universities have worked with charities to provide free meals, groceries, food pantries, hampers, all sorts of things. They've also provided emergency housing support, visa advice, tenancy advice, other legal advice, and in many cases, fee deferrals to help with the additional financial pressure. Support's also being provided by governments. In the southern state of Victoria, more than 7,000 Indian students have received one-off grants. We're also mindful that students from India, as from the other 143 countries that people travel to study in Australia, are concerned about visas and about visa status. Universities Australia, the group that I lead, has worked closely with the government to reform visa rules, and we're very thankful that changes have been made. So if you're concerned about visa granting right now, you can be reassured that you can now apply for a visa. Processing is back underway. When the borders reopen, students will be able to return to campuses here in Australia. If you're in India studying online due to COVID-19, those hours will now count towards your post-study work visa, and I know that's a matter of real reassurance to many students. Indian students here will be able to renew or extend their visas if COVID has entirely understandably slowed your study progress down without the usual fee. So in terms of rules and regulations, we're back underway. Australia is absolutely and has always been open for business, but I know that those visa issues have made a real difference, and we are very grateful to the Australian government for assisting with that and in fact making those changes. All the things that have made Australia a favourite destination for Indian students in fact remain the same. Safety and welfare remains at the top of the list. and so does quality of life. Australia is consistently ranked among one of the safest countries in the world. Combine that with a world-class education and Australia is a very good bet. If you're considering studying overseas, if students in India are considering studying overseas, Australia is, as it always has been, a very good place to choose. I can't ignore the fact that relative to the rest of the world, say the UK, Canada and the United States, we're doing very well in the face of the virus. We know that can turn overnight, but the reality here is that COVID-19 is under control in every state and territory except Victoria, my hometown. And in Victoria, numbers are being pushed down very systematically and with terrifically hopeful results. Also, studying in Australia compared to the UK, for example, is a very strong value for money proposition. That also remains unchanged. Students in Australia and India have been adapting, as I said, extraordinarily to the really very substantial changes to studying online. Many of them now, of course, are back on campus. That depends which state and territory you're in, but that adaptation has been extraordinary and we will learn things from that. Students, staff and universities will learn things from that. The one very clear message I get though from students is they just can't wait to get back with their friends onto campus. And we know that students who are back in states where it's safe to be back on campus in close proximity to other students are relishing that face-to-face contact. And as soon as it's safe to do so on all university campuses, students will not just be welcome, but very, very warmly welcome back onto the campuses that Universities Australia represents, which is almost the entire system. The last thing I want to say is there is so much uncertainty at the moment. There are so many things to worry about. What I'd urge both you to do and to communicate to any student you're talking to is to remain positive. It is extraordinary to see the stories we have seen here in Australia, and I'm sure you've seen the same things in India, of communities really drawing together in the face of extraordinary challenge, extraordinary adversity, helping each other to get by, but also helping each other to think extraordinarily creatively and really innovative ways to deal with the challenges that we all face. I think it's an Indian characteristic, that sort of creativity and that sort of grit and determination. I think it's an Australian characteristic. I think it's one of the things that makes us a terrific partnership, and I look forward to the comments of other panellists, and thank you very much for the invitation to speak.
Thank you, Catriona. You really summed up how welcome the international and Indian students are in Australia and how supportive the universities have been. In fact, just to add, there are several universities who actually give back a part of the tuition fees in terms of hard dollars. And so many of the students came to me in my ecosystem and told how helpful and timely those cash grants were when they were finding it difficult in the initial stages. So thank you very much for bringing in evidence-based, supportive, welcoming atmosphere of the Australian universities. Thank you. Our next speaker is going to be Mr. Stuart Reese. Stuart is a Senior Trade and Investment Commissioner, South Asia of Austrade. Stuart will be talking about why Indian students would like to stay in Australia, the impacts of COVID on student motivations and mobility, and what Austrade is doing. So over to you, Stuart.
Thank you very much, Partha. I hope everybody can hear me. Yeah, I did want to start with a bit of a top-level summary of why students want to study in Australia. And that's not because people don't know it, but I think it's worthwhile just reminding ourselves and thinking about what might be at risk at the moment, and some of the reasons why we can't actually take the market for granted. It is a little bit fragile, but just to recap on some of those reasons, you know, they choose Australia because of the high rankings of the universities in the country. And some of those rankings are very much aligned with the research output from them. The impact that a recognised high quality of education has on their future career success. They come to Australia because they want exposure to this international, free, relaxed lifestyle we have here, And for some, of course, it includes post-study work rights, opportunities for permanent residencies, and other factors like the cost of living in comparison with the USA, the UK, and so forth. But fundamentally, all of them want that full experience, the full experience of a quality education while enjoying that life in Australia, getting work experience, and all the things that enables for having better career prospects. And, you know, a fairly big percentage of Indian parents are willing to take on debt to fund an education internationally for the youth. Catriona has also has already mentioned some of those statistics, but you know, at the end of June, there was still about 94,000 or so, I think, students remaining in Australia from India. And you know, at the start of the year, it looked to be a very healthy number. But we've got to remember, in the preceding years, it was less rosy, and we had a decade from 2009 where there was a big fall. Parents choosing to send their students or their children elsewhere. And then it was really a half decade of, you know, rebuilding reputation, influencing student motivation. And it was only last year, 2019, that the student numbers actually exceeded those of 2009. So it was a long time. There was a lot of factors behind that impacting perception of study in Australia and how safe it was, and the ability to travel during some of those years that resulted in that decline. But I think it's a good thing to just bear in mind that we actually can't take India or Indian students for granted. And if we do, there will actually be potentially quite a long tail to rebuild the pipeline. So, you know, my point in saying this is that what Australia and its institutions have done or failed to do through the crisis to genuinely care for the well-being of international students is going to impact perceptions and motivations to come to Australia for potentially years to come. So it is a fragile market, and students and parents have other choices. And what really matters here and now is the student experience of here and now. And doing more might look like an expensive investment, but to me it's going to be a lot more effective than, say, losing 50% of that pipeline for years to come. There is a bit of silver lining though, and by and large, while sentiment is surely shifting in the wrong direction, and the experience of students in Australia is nothing like what they signed up for, sentiment actually remains higher than we might think. And we've been running a couple of surveys of around 7,500 students across Australia, and they're telling us that despite these uncertain times, the restrictive, drastically changed study and living experience in Australia, they actually remain pretty positive. And that was reinforced to me in an article I read in the Melbourne Age last week about Monash University's student residences that indicated that while many of them are, you know, understandably under financial stress, they actually remain pretty positive about the university experience here. And it was good to hear from Catriona earlier too about what universities in general have been doing. So I think the combined efforts and support of government, the institutions and the other networks that students are part of are making a difference. But overall also, it's also due to the, you know, generally healthy attitude and approach of the international students to being in Australia during their time. But going forward, the sector needs to build, I think, more resilience into their student pipelines. And this is where Austrade and other agencies that are active either in Australia or India are playing a role. It's our goal to not just maintain but increase awareness and the positive sentiments about the opportunity that study in Australia offers to them. And speaking for myself, the team I lead at Austrade, we're going to be doubling down on the India market, focused on attracting students that are going to provide the greatest positive impact to Australia's education economy, and also doing things that the Minister for Education, Dan Tehan, was mentioning. Look at how we can actually bring greater diversity into what and where students study in Australia. So we've recently created a new dedicated student landing hub for Indian students on the Study in Australia website. We've launched a schools video competition this week on the site, promoting new content about the student experience in Australia during COVID. we've been developing and providing new content, providing mentoring on future career paths, and also giving students the opportunity to experience some virtual lectures. And over the last few months, we've held a few online masterclasses for around 60,000 educators in India with the Central Board of Secondary Education. So helping to build up and maintain the perceptions of Australia and the quality of education across the board. And for the education sector, we've also introduced some new course search functionality so that we can generate leads that directly go to educational institutions. But so going forward, we're going to be a lot more targeted in where we focus our efforts along the student and parent journey to international study. And in this, we're going to be actually far more targeted on the content and campaigns than we ever had before. So I've got budget. We're designing new digital platforms we're going to offer as tools and services to the education sector in Australia, specifically for the India market. And my ambition for my team in India is we're actually going to develop and be the best globally at gaining the attention of students in India and helping institutions and agents convert those into people that actually study in Australia. So a bit more silver lining. This week, one of the universities from Australia in India has told us that applications for their intakes in February 2001 is actually at the same level as it was for 2020. Now, we know it's not the same across the board, but we do hope that when students get some clarity on borders opening and that face-to-face, the on-campus learning experience is permitted, that it'll be replicated across lots more. So, Partha, thank you very much.
Thank you, Stuart. That was very exciting and interesting, especially from a future student's perspective, that Australia is doing so much in terms of providing several resources through your website to enhance the experience of the students. So thank you again, Stuart. Without wasting any further time, we are running a little behind schedule. I'm going to invite our next speaker, Michael Wesley. Michael is the Deputy Vice Chancellor International in the University of Melbourne. And Michael is going to talk about how the University of Melbourne is adopting its India strategy in view of the COVID challenges. Over to you, Michael.
Partha, thank you. Let me just correct the title a little bit. While India is an important part of my remit, so are many other countries and regions of the world as well. And thank you for the invitation to be here. Colleagues, the University of Melbourne is a very ambitious, internationally ambitious university. We are deeply proud of our global linkages and research partnerships, student exchange agreements. I was very happy to be on the Minister's visit to India last November and to learn a whole lot more about this fascinating country. As Partha says, last August, the Vice-Chancellor of the University of Melbourne launched the University of Melbourne's plan for engaging more deeply with India. This has a range of different aspects to it, and of course it involves building on our very rich network of partnerships and agreements that we have with universities and institutes across India. We have been very proud to welcome students from India, and indeed to encourage our own students to go to India and study and experience life in that beautiful and important country under the new Colombo plan, but also under a range of other arrangements, including joint PhD programs that we have. Obviously, we have been affected by the COVID crisis. Had it not been for COVID, I would have been back in India sometime around this time with my Assistant Deputy Vice Chancellor for India, working on developing a whole range of interests that we have, including in the health and disability sectors, in science, in engineering, in fine arts, in design, in architecture,
that we have been developing. The great news is that COVID has, if anything, increased the globalist impulses of universities. Our inability to travel, our inability to do the international things that we once did, seems to have only made us double down on our determination to build our international linkages and to build our international activities. And this is especially the case of our relationships with our partner universities in India. We've been discussing with partner universities and institutes things like global virtual classrooms, where we bring Indian students and Australian students together to work on a common curriculum from different points of view. We've been engaging in virtual seminars, conferences and webinars, which allow us to reach a much broader section and audience of students, researchers in India and across Australia through our Australia-India Institute and its activities. We've been able to run a virtual legal moot competition, which for the first time ever has been able to welcome contestants from poorer institutions who may not have been able to physically travel to moot competitions in the past. All of these things have been examples of innovations that have been sponsored and shared across the world and between the University of Melbourne and our Indian partners. So while the COVID crisis is truly awful, and let me just reinforce Catriona's points about the impact on our international students who are doing it incredibly tough, and we're doing everything we can to support them in this really difficult time. I'm actually optimistic. I think that the University of Melbourne and universities around the world and in India will emerge from this crisis even more globalized, even more determined to build international activities and international linkages. And I look forward to that. It will certainly make my job a heck of a lot easier. And I look forward in particular to the next time when I can get on a plane and spend time in wonderful India. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. That was short and sweet. You spoke about some of the very interesting innovation that the University of Melbourne is doing, and I think many will take inspiration from your innovations. You talked about the partnering with the universities. You talked about virtual seminars, research, competition, a whole lot of new opportunities those are opening up post-COVID. I think this is exactly what we are here today for, to hear. So thank you again, Michael. Now I'm going to invite our own Ravneet Pawar. She is the Deputy Vice President Global and CEO South Asia for the Deakin University. Deakin University has got, I think, over 25 years of association with India, and no one is better than Ravneet to actually talk about the impact of the pandemic on international education and the recovery roadmap. So Ravneet, over to you.
Thanks very much, Partha, and thank you very much to everyone and the previous speakers. And I couldn't agree more with what Catriona and also what Michael talked about. I think that we are in difficult times, and I wouldn't say that life is going to be the same. Life will be different. It will be challenging, but I think that we can definitely see a roadmap ahead. And I think that is the silver lining as I see it. In India, let me just start by sort of acknowledging the support of the Deakin leadership for our strategy in India. Deakin has had a rich history of 26 years, and my journey is a 26-year-old journey with Deakin University. And I have to say that one of the key reasons why we have been able to do what we have been able to do in India is because of the very, very exciting support and continuous support of the Deakin leadership. And I think that it is important to note that we have had challenging times before as well. But one thing that has been consistent is the risk-taking ability and the focus towards ensuring a holistic partnership between Deakin and India. The current situation with the pandemic in India is no different than anywhere in the world. Most students are trying to study online, and most institutions are struggling with their online technology. I think that this is the time for universities in Australia to think about how we can look at together a future world of collaboration and cooperation. I think one of the things that we should note is that India has just, of course, introduced the new education policy. And this new education policy, actually, I might just give a very quick 10-point agenda of what this policy really means to us in Australia. The first thing that it really tells us that India is ready to accept that they will need to partner with world-class institutions to ensure excellence in education and teaching. So I think Australia is a great fit there. The second thing I think it talks about is multi-discipline approach. If you know India, you know that in India, we have never had this approach before. So multi-discipline approach, and I think post-COVID, and I'm talking recovery in my mind, I think that post-COVID, there is immense opportunity for Australian institutions to work in India in the space of enhancing curriculum and working with Indian institutions. The third thing I think is India is ready for regulatory reforms. And that is a big change for India. And India is not easy to do business in. So I think that once we settle down with the regulatory reforms, it'll be important for both the governments to talk about how we can support each other's initiatives through our institutional partnerships. I think the next point is expansion with quality and access. India has immense number of high middle class income group students which are looking at studying both internationally and domestically. And I think coming on to the point that the High Commissioner has made before, that it is really important for us to think about how Australian institutions can actually either set up in India or work in collaboration and holistic partnerships as we move into the future. I think gone are the days when we will just have planefuls of people going on to certain destinations to study. I think that it'll be more hybrid models that will come into the picture, where we will use technology to the fullest. People will need to study in their own time, and we will have to have some bit of on-campus study as well. So I think this hybrid model looks like more acceptable, at least for the students around South Asia. The other big change that I think is happening in my discussions with the Indian government and the Indian bureaucracy and the institutions here has made me to believe that India has realized its real importance for building the research ecosystem. In our country here, we have not had research in universities as a traditional approach. And I think that is going to change. We will have world-class universities that will be able to partner with institutions to build research capability and complementarity. The other thing I think is faculty training and development. And I think in this online world, it is so much easier for universities in Australia to support and help in contribution of this faculty focus in what Indian institutions will be looking at. Governance and leadership. I think if we are able to contribute to help build India, its support in governance and leadership, and for Australia to learn how a developing country is able to do that with immense support from countries like Australia, I think we've got a great future of a holistic partnership there. Academic freedom and institutional autonomy is the next focus that most Indian institutions have been asking from the government. And I think that in the new education policy, it is very evident that, there is complete understanding in this system that it needs more institutional autonomy, which means that it will help institutions break down the usual box approach of this can be done and this can't be done, and be able to actually engage more openly and freely with institutions around the world, which gives a lot of focus to where universities like Deakin, where we have been doing a lot of work in India to partner with institutions here in innovative models. I think We will need to use technology to the best of its ability. But my view is just a relationship based on digital education will not work in India. It will have to be blended. It will have to have the right approach of pedagogy and price. I think the other bit is that international accreditation and institutional support is something that most of the universities in India, whether you talk to the IITs or you talk to the tier 2 universities, there is a lot of interest in being global universities, which again opens doors for Australia to engage post-pandemic or even during pandemic times through our expertise in how to build institutional capacity and capability. I think the pandemic will redefine the role of the educator and the learner, and it will pose quite interesting opportunities for both India and Australia in these rapid transformation times. Strategic initiatives and partnerships, skilling the workforce of the now and the future, and the risk-taking ability and capability will make institutions a lot more engaging and a lot more collaborative in India. My other quick, I don't know if I'm running out of time, but very quick 7 pointers that I think we need to think about as institutions for engaging post-pandemic. The first is, how do we come up with innovative blended models of teaching and learning? The second is the pedagogy that we use, because our learners will have to be different in terms of what they have been used to. So what pedagogy does happen to make sure that we are on the right track? Content and flexibility, and I think price. I think price is one that will define how India engages. The reach, geographic dispersion, equity and access are the main aspects that India is struggling with. And I think Australia and India can work together in taking this to the next step. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ravneet. You really spoke about something which is so contemporary and current. That's the new education policy and the opportunities that is going to put forward to both the countries. AIBC is actually finalizing almost another webinar only on this topic. So I'm sure it'll be of interest to others when this webinar is announced. You talked about faculty exchange, blended approach. I think all these are excellent thought process which will help the education ecosystem. So thank you, Ravneet, once more. We are really running short of time, but I will go through definitely all the speakers, and if that means the question answer has to be sacrificed. So we have the next speaker, which is Chaminda Ranasinghe. Chaminda is the Chief Marketing Officer, Global Marketing and Student Recruitment from RMIT University, and he'll be speaking about the future-ready graduates and how that is coming more in relevance post-COVID. Over to you, Chaminda.
Thank you, Partha, and AIBC for having me. And to be fair, all the speakers, it's been wonderful to hear about our plans for the future as we all face into a post-COVID world. The interesting thing, as you put it, Partha, is that the trends that have been shaping the world as we see it, and particularly the future of work, as I see it, it's just becoming faster. We're accelerating these trends through the pandemic. And what we've got to think through is, how do we learn from not just the current experience, but from the past? We have a rich, as Ravneet put it, we have a rich history of educating students from around the world, and particularly India. And I'm lucky to say that my own father is an international student who came here, and as a result, I've been lucky enough to be a beneficiary of that education. And I've also watched many of my family come from the subcontinent as well and benefited from this. So what are the lessons learned from all of those generations of students that have come here in the past? And importantly, as we look at the megatrends that we're talking about, they are becoming faster. So things like, I think we spoke about the demographic shifts and mobility of people. That's certainly changing as a result of the inability for us to travel. People are picking up skills much faster. We're at home and we're now able to pick up and snack on new skills through the digital medium much faster than we've done before. The opportunities that we've come to expect, things take longer when you have time, but in the current circumstance, everything is becoming faster. For example, looking for a vaccine, the innovation that's becoming such a rush. We have to find a vaccine for COVID. The beauty of this is how fast people are collaborating, and the willingness to collaborate has certainly improved. And that's what I'm seeing across the board. Digital adoption, because it's now a necessity. We have no choice but to accept online as a channel rather than in the past using it as a secondary option. These are the sorts of new trends that are simply becoming faster. So how do we not just sort of learn from and accept those, but really harness them to drive the opportunities for educating our students? And the important thing for me is, if I take again the lesson I mentioned, my father's experience, if you bring an opportunity for an education for a student that is relevant to not just the country that they're migrating to learn, so the skills that my father picked up when he came to Australia were relevant to the Australian market, but far more important was that education to the country that he came from. And that important skill, I think, and that lesson is something that we've got to make sure that we build upon as we look at the disruptions for the future of work. So what are the future of jobs that are important to Australia, but equally, or if not more important, what are the jobs of the future for India? What skills does the future of India require to make sure that both our countries succeed in this new world? And if I look at the fourth industrial revolution and how it's transforming the labor market, it's an interesting stat that I've been looking at. The skills mismatch that we're seeing, there's a key gap affecting 1 out of every 3 employees globally, but there's a gap between their skills and what's required to do their jobs. And particularly as we look into the future, that's going to impact both our countries more and more. So how do we become more innovative, and how do we make sure that our students pick up the relevant skills as they face into an ever-changing future? We've got to build skills that allow them to pick up those the education in a way that they can partner with industry and partner with future employers, with educators, so that we deliver those things. So for example, at RMIT, some of the things that we have done, not just in the 6 months since COVID, but before that even, is partnering with industry. For example, even today, we were just announcing an expansion of a program that is actually supported by Minister Tien with Siemens to look at how we're driving Industry 4.0. We have partnered with Amazon, for example, to look at how we can build cyber-ready cloud environments. We're partnering with companies like Apple to make sure that we're scaling Swift coding and building of apps. These sorts of joint partnerships, and then allowing the university to make sure that you're building students who are future ready, I think is going to be really important. And as Ravneet put it, we've got to think about new channels of delivery, blended models, making sure that we are delivering the services and the education in a way that allows the students to pick up not just the technical skills, but the soft skills. These are really important. So I think the post-COVID world is going to bring forward a lot of the trends that we're seeing, not just in education, but in the future of work, in the way that we live our lives. As a result, as universities here in Australia, our opportunity is to make sure that we're looking to build and graduate students who are going to prosper, really drive the prosperity of India and Australia and the geographies that we operate within. So that's kind of the way I see it. Partha, I'll hand it back to you because I'm conscious of time.
Thank you very much, Aminda. That was very concise. You talked about the skills gap for being job ready. You talked about the partnering with the industries. You talked about the innovative channels, the new delivery model, the skills focus. I think all of them are extremely relevant, especially for the future of jobs and future of education. So thank you, Chaminda, for that. And now we come to the last speaker. We have Professor Richard Speed. Professor Richard Speed is the Deputy Vice Chancellor International of La Trobe University. La Trobe University has developed several innovative solutions to support international students. Therefore, we invite Professor Speed to share the innovations La Trobe University has created to address the post-COVID era from the students' support perspective. Over to you, Professor.
Thank you, Partha. I feel very much like the last batsman coming in a T20 where there's 30 to get off, 1 over, and we're running out of time. So I will be as concise as I can. I want to start from the premise that the Australian international student system is predicated on the fact that students are able to travel, that students are studying full-time, they're studying on campus, and they can work in accordance to their visa conditions. And all of that has gone in the last 6 months. And one of the things that that has meant is that we've all had to respond to a level of uncertainty amongst our students that has forced innovation on all of the universities. And we've heard about some of the things that my colleagues have been doing. So I'll just flag a few and I'll talk about why we did them. So one of the things that we did for the second half of this year is we switched to terms. La Trobe is a traditional semester-based university. We switched to terms, we introduced extra start points. And the reason we did that was because, of course, the students couldn't get their documents, school results were disrupted and so on. So we tried to give students more points at which they could start online and give them a better opportunity to progress smoothly into university. And that's worked well. So, and we can see students moving if they're not certain about having their materials ready for an application, we can see them moving back through our application processes to a later start point, but they're staying connected and they're staying on the journey that they committed to before COVID came along. Obviously, like all institutions, we've been flexing our scholarships. We understand that families have been in more difficult circumstances and we need to provide support to our students. And you know, again, we've worked hard to make sure that students who are worried about their financial situation are still able to start. But in fact, one of the ways that we found that to do that is to adjust the way that we adjust our terms. So we, you know, again, we've been allowing students to start on the basis of a deposit. And if they don't enjoy their online experience, they can withdraw without putting at risk the whole set of fees that are involved in this. Like everybody else, we put in a lot of support on for students who are onshore with an electronic buddy system, with virtual lounges, social meetings and so on. And again, as Catriona referred to right at the start of this, millions of dollars of additional support, including a really generously supported appeal to our alumni. And I mean, one of the other things that we've noticed, and again, I don't know if my colleagues have seen this as well, but we've seen a number of our Indian students picking up opportunities to do remote work back into India from some of the technology companies and service companies and so on. And that's been something that has really helped the international students, the Indian students in Victoria, okay, as we've gone through some of these financial challenges. And then just finally, okay, it's not just the universities, obviously the government, the Australian government has had to think about things like how to do post-study work rights in this new environment, what to do about visas. But I just want to go right back to a point that Minister Tian made at the start. He held up that picture of the 3 Destinations Australia scholarship holders who were going to Warrnambool. We have Destination Australia scholarships at our campus in Bendigo in northern Victoria. Okay. And the arrival of those students again was disrupted by COVID in March, but despite that, okay, and off a very, very short recruiting period, we have more international students studying through our Bendigo campus than ever before. And that in part is a result of the post-study work right changes that the Australian government has brought in and the Destination Australia scholarships that have come in. So, you know, we have an example there of something that was working
to provide better opportunities for international students coming to Australia and Indian students in particular. Okay, it's been disrupted by COVID, but we would expect that to come back quickly once travel resumes. So I think it was Seema Shah's asked a question about, what would Australia do relative to the competition? I do think that this emphasis on different opportunities in regional locations is something where Australia has the opportunity to build a much more competitive offer than perhaps the UK or Canada or others are able to do. So I'm really looking forward to getting back and using those initiatives to generate more opportunities. And I'll wrap up there. Thank you very much, Puppet.
Thank you, Professor. I think you brought in the new realities, which are really the context. The way they studied on campus, the opportunity that they had to go and work and experience Australian industries, the traveling as part of education, all these are gone. So definitely, I think your starting point and the context is extremely important. And I think everyone is actually looking for innovative solutions to provide either in a different way, the same experience or alternate experience, which can actually compensate. So really post-COVID era will be seen as successful or not successful based on what solutions the universities bring in. Now, we have really run out of time, so we will have maybe one or two quick questions just to make sure that the audience do have their voice heard and make sure that we get some panelist quick answer. So instead of going to the huge number of questions which came through, one of the quick question will be, which will be relevant to all of you, is that how the Australian universities are going to be more adaptive and more supportive as against the options and international students will have to go to UK, US, or other countries. So some quick inputs from anyone from the panel.
Can I just say that I think the first thing would be that most Australian universities understand that students find it difficult in times like this to leave home. So the online options are much better. And I think there are a couple of Australian universities that are doing that. I think the scholarship bursary scheme is a very important one because price is a big issue in the Indian market. So I think support to the students for that. And I think that universities do a lot in supporting students to look at on-campus jobs or jobs in Australia. And I think that someone earlier did mention that a lot of students do take loan. And I think when they take loan, the expectation is to be able to learn and earn. So I think a lot of work is being done by Australian universities to help students continue to do their studies, post-COVID, whether online or on campus, depending on the situation, but definitely looking at supporting them to find work and to see how they can support themselves. And I think the care part of Australian universities is amazing in terms of how we look after our international students.
Anyone else from the panel would like to answer the question, how we are more competitive against other destination for the...
If I can just add to what Ravneet's just said, and I'd support all the comments that she made about what universities in Australia are doing. I think the point that hasn't been made is that one of the really important things for any student choosing a study destination is how safe that country is and how safe it is in terms of COVID. Australia has taken a very cautious, very solid approach to dealing with the virus. And as I said before, we're looking pretty good. The last thing you want to do is say that and have it all go pear-shaped tomorrow, but we've taken a very mature, very cautious approach. I know that means borders are closed longer than people would like them to be, but that is to keep everyone safe. So it's in everyone's interest. So you've got to wait a little bit longer, but once those borders are open, Australia will be not just the safe destination we were before, but an even safer COVID-safe destination. I think that's in the new world we're all confronting, a very important consideration.
Thank you, Catriona, for that. I'll just have one overview question because that's the only time we have, looks like, which is various questions put together. People are asking, when will Australia open up? When they will have the opportunity to come up and actually study on campus, number one. And number two is there a blended model in the interim, which is not 100% online, but a blend? And the third thing is there any government thought policy change or support in terms of, in this difficult time, that the international student will expect from the lawmakers. So I know Minister has had another appointment left. So if anyone from the panel would like to answer this is going to be the last question. And all the other questions we will actually try and put in the AIBC website as the answers. But this one, let's get some views quickly.
Wanted to say really briefly, when is the crystal ball question? Again, that's entirely in the hands of government and the very high level health advisors who are telling them when it's safe. Australian universities stand ready to welcome students back through the borders the moment the borders open. The situation is quite variable between states and territories at the moment. On some campuses, students are back already, so there'll be some students having face-to-face classes. That will proceed and expand absolutely in line with the health advice and the trajectory of the virus. That's one of the things we can't control, although we can do a lot to try and make sure we keep it as contained as we can. I'm afraid that's a non-answer, but it's an impossible question to answer. When will people be all back on campus and everything will be clear and everything will be lovely again?
Anyone else?
I might add to that, Partha, and talk about something different, but in the context of different models rather than just online. I think all the universities, and particularly the ones that we've spoken about, RMITs, looking at plenty of different ways to try and drive new ways of learning, and that could be through partnerships, not just other universities, but maybe corporate partners with some fantastic organizations in India. I mean, if you take some of the major tech companies, we should be working where students are learning maybe online, but then applying that learning hands-on through a partner. So we're going to think about new models where there could be some face-to-face in-country and online learning until they can travel, and then and who's to say that should stop once the pandemic finishes? When they go back home through summer school or whatever else, there should be other ways to do this. So I think there's opportunities that we take through the pandemic as learnings and then go forward. So online is one channel, but we are looking at many other ways to improve the experience.
So thank you very much. The panelists were excellent. I'm sure there's so many questions. I wish we had more time, but definitely we'll try and answer those through the website, AIBC website. So I will hand over now for the formal vote of thanks to Ravneet.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Thank you very much, Partha, and thank you for moderating the session so wonderfully. It is my pleasure to propose the vote of thanks to the Honourable Minister, the Honourable Minister for Education, Australia, Mr. Dantian, for supporting the Australia-India relationship and also for being present at the AIBC seminar today. To both the High Commissioners, High Commissioner for Australia to India, Government of Australia, His Excellency Honourable Mr. Barry O'Farrell, AO, thank you so much. High Commissioner, it has been a pleasure to hear you and to see you support the Australia-India relationship from very much being in Delhi. The High Commissioner of India to Australia, Government of India, His Excellency A. Gitish Sharma, thank you, sir, for being part of the seminar and also for your amazing support to the relationship. Chief Executive Universities Australia, Catriona Jackson, thank you. And I think you bring out an element which is absolutely relevant about safety to Australia. Having my own son in Australia, I can right now, and being in India, I can relate to that very well. So thank you so much for all your support. Senior Trade and Investment Commissioner, South Asia, Australia, Stuart Reese, thank you so much. And I think we have done quite a few webinars together, and I think your support to the India relationship continues even from Australia while you're there. Michael Wesley, the Deputy Vice Chancellor, International University of Melbourne, Chief Marketing Officer, Global Marketing, Digital and Student Recruitment, RMIT, Deputy Vice Chancellor, International La Trobe University, Richard Spade. I think it's been a pleasure to be listening to your wonderful comments, and I think all your universities have done a great job in bringing out the Australia-India relationship. I would like to thank AIBC Director Vinod and Partha for putting this together, and the National Chair Jim Verghese, and the patron of AIBC Victoria, Mr. Vasan Srinivasan, for all their support. I would like to acknowledge our sponsor, the Managing Director, Study Path International, who's been with us, Shelley Karanti, for being here, and the Operations Director, Aaron Yoship. Thank you so much for your support to this. But folks, nothing will go without actually thanking the people who've done the very, very focused hard work, all the administration and IT support given by Marina Saras, Manjeet Singh, Karishma, Wendy, and Vishal from AIBC. Thank you so much for all your wonderful support in putting this wonderful seminar together, and I look forward to many more. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So should we call it formally, the webinar is closed and people can log out?
Thank you, and congrats to the team.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.